Hello, and welcome back to the Imagia AI for Finance podcast. This is Brian Chappell. As promised, we're back with the second part of our interview, order to cash expert John Donovan. We talked about a lot of things involving testing and where your company needs to be with its sort of background before implementing AI, and we wanted to get into some of the key strategies for implementing it. And John's going to kick us off with that today. So, without further ado, John, would you like to start outlining some of those key strategies that you would recommend for an organization and their back office functions that they need to undertake as part of the transition to greater dependence in AI based solutions?
Certainly, Brian. Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Hopefully, we can move through the questions that you have. And as I said in the previous podcast, if there are questions, they can present them to you. I'd be happy to get back with them individually, or maybe even a follow-up podcast addressing the questions that people bring to the table. So with that, let's kick it off.
Okay, so let's talk about those first steps, those things that are really important as far as the key strategies that companies need to implement. As an organization, as they're taking on this transition to a greater dependence on AI based solutions and platforms and approaches to their operations.
Okay. I'll sound a little repetitive in some of these topics, but I want to make sure that anybody joining for the first time, gets some idea of what we're talking about here. So we're talking about AI implementation strategy. And in the previous podcast, you can go back and we talked about the types of artificial intelligence that are out there today. Most of those are integrated into some of the AR systems that are out there, as well as the back office infrastructure. As we get to this point, though, you've got a team that may be looking at upgrading their systems or implementing new features if they're using an ERP system or even Microsoft, one of the ERPs that are out there. And there's several. I'm not picking on any one, but they're in the process of developing and enhancing their systems. So as they enhance their systems, there will be changes. And the changes are sometimes pre-announced, sometimes announced after they've been released. But the key here is, before you even get there, is what is the organization doing to prepare for changes? Whether those changes are minor or major, there's no such thing as right now as a full-blown AI implementation for back office procedures. It's a step at a time. So the good news is, as they're released, a company can adjust and integrate those systems applications into their systems. If they're going with a new system, which is highly unlikely because that's a 2-year project if you put it in an ERP system. In some cases, it's even longer, depending on the complexity of the organization. So the first thing the back office operations have to do is they have to establish policies and procedures and make it very clear what the guidelines are for collecting data, where it's stored, how it's cleansed, how it's used, and how it's disposed of. A lot of leading companies are tackling the responsible AI methodology like this, and partly because the governance is complex and because the ecosystems are currently a patchwork of initiatives, applications, homegrown quick fixes, and manual processes that they've implemented over a period of 10 years in some case. So if you've got a global business, then you also have all of the changes that are taking place globally. And that could be anything from tax laws to antitrust. All of that comes into play. So you may not be able to roll out an application right away if it's not in sync with the local laws, regulations, and taxing authorities. So you have to assign roles and responsibilities that clearly define who's going to be responsible for what data, the quality of that data, and how that data compliance is being maintained. I can tell you that there are software solutions out there. I won't get into naming names, but there are software solutions that will help you get there faster. There are also the old-fashioned way of just getting teams together and start and go through every part of the back office operation to see where their data quality may be questionable or not synced. A lot of companies are now saying it's autonomous, but I have not yet seen a fully autonomous back office operation. There's always some part that's disconnected. I'll use a
Is that
simple
right?
example. Where the CRM goes to the sales organization, you may be able to look at it from the back office operations, but it's not synced. So every time you're going to do something, you have to go back and into another system and look it up if you have permission. If you don't, then you've got to rely on somebody in that department to give you access to that permission, or basically a dashboard. So there have to be regular audits that periodically review the data practices and identify and address any issues there are before you try to attempt to upgrade your systems, especially with artificial intelligence. You hear a lot about the artificial intelligence not being accurate, and there's always a disclaimer on those companies that are producing back office solutions today with AI in it that basically buyer beware. So the data quality assessment and profiling that, you have to analyze that data, the characteristics, and identify inconsistencies, missing values, and outliers. Then the data validation, there has to be a check against the predefined rules, constraints to ensure the accuracy, completeness. And I said this in the previous podcast. The information, and I'm going to use a AR credit reporting agency as an example. They get that information, they don't make it. They buy it or they include it as part of their services, but in order to be complete, they ask that their customers send them trade tapes. Trade tapes are a picture of a point in time. But if there's something going on in the background, for example, you've got a finance department or logistics department issuing return authorizations, and that doesn't hit the AR right away, then the AR shows delinquency and the customer's waiting for a return. And the last thing they want to get is a past due notice that they're not cooperating when they have, in fact, have a return authorization in their hand and they've returned the goods and they have a proof of delivery. So there are things like that. There have to be synced, coordinated, and that's what I'm referring to as an autonomous system. Now, data cleansing has to have a process in place to identify inconsistencies and breakdowns and correct the errors and inconsistencies and the missing values before you start to migrate over to an AI solution. Otherwise, you've got bad data and it's no better or worse than what you had before. But you're not.
Is that a really frequent problem, do you find?
It is a very. I hear autonomous systems all the time, but what is defined as autonomous might be a light version of autonomous. Giving an example, a customer, as I said, returns goods. That's the logistics department. A customer wants to amend their contract. That's the CRM and the legal departments. If you look at any system today, and I'll bet on that one because they're not hooked up. It's communications usually via email, or maybe you have to go into another system to see what the status is. And that, of course, takes time, takes effort, and it takes resources. AI will eliminate a lot of that, we'll call it manual labor. But right now, most everybody I know of is working on, intelligent systems, answering the phone, directing the call to the right department. But it really hasn't got into the back office, the depth of the back office operations that I'm talking about. So, tracking the data to the source of data and transferring that into a new system is not always easy because it's not there. It's someplace, but that may not be maintained well. It might have errors in it. That's why auditors go through the process of checking to see if everything is flowing properly. Customers usually will record a complaint when something is not going right in their eyes. Well, that reporting system is probably another system within the organization, and they just forward the call, but they don't really forward the data. So somebody's going to go back and look it up. So tracking the source of the data, its data, the accuracy of that data, make sure that all the information is there. A customer saying, I didn't get the goods and I'm not going to pay the invoice, and the invoice has 200 line items. Are you talking the whole shipment, or you're talking one line item? So those are the types of things that need to be verified that today are manually handled. And in some cases, the ball gets dropped and there's a customer satisfaction issue, and there's also an accounting accuracy issue. So tracing the data flow and understanding how that data moves through the organization will identify the potential risks. And again, there are software solutions out there that will do it. Others do flow charts. They're not quite as accurate because they're not automated. They're not digital. What you want is a digital solution to get you over the first hurdle. So that's creating an autonomous system when everything is at your fingertips. And quite frankly, if it is, the system can usually handle it by forwarding, for example, a copy of an invoice or a partial shipment that went out. The customer's contract says full shipments only. Well, it will put in the contract, pull in the contract clause and say, you're right. Do you want to return it? Or do you want us to break it into two parts, and can you give me another or sub PO? Those are the types of things I'm talking about when I'm talking about autonomous. The systems need to talk to each other, and that's internal and external. And I can tell you that external is going to be even a bigger challenge because not everybody is got the resources to do the type of accounting and process management and account management that we're talking about here. That's the beauty of artificial intelligence. Eventually it'll get there and the machine can handle it. So proof of delivery doesn't have to be somebody go out and get it. It should be right there. And if the customer wants to see it, or the customer says, I didn't get it, they call up, they self-help, they push a button, and it's right there in front of them. So those are the types of things where autonomous infrastructure really comes into play with artificial intelligence. The applications, when we get into determining laws and regulations, the companies that I've worked for are international. So everybody's got a different set of rules based on their country that they're doing business out of. The accounting systems are different. And then that has to be rolled up, and if you're a U.S. company, into U.S. accounting standards. Again, is that done by somebody sending it in and uploading it and converting it, or is it? And if there are questions, how are those questions addressed? So, again, everything has to be accounted for, and there are laws as well as procedures that have to be followed. So conducting a risk assessment is what your auditor should be helping you with, and evaluating the risk and the costs associated with noncompliance. An example, the tax laws change, and if you're using a tax system and it didn't get uploaded for some reason, the tax rates are wrong or in some cases missing. I have an example in Arizona where they're taxing both at the state level and at the county level, and in some cases, like in New York, the city level. So you've got three taxing authorities that you have to load that tape. If for some reason you don't get all three, your invoice is incorrect. And then you've got to go back and ask for the shortage if you're taxing the customer. The other is in the area of non-exempt and exempt customers for tax purposes. Where are those documents kept? When are they outdated? If the goods are shipped to a different state, for example, and you don't have an exemption certificate on file, the system will bill tax. But the customer says, all you had to do is call me and I would have given you the certificate. Well, the system can do that for you. But again, you have to know and teach the system what you want it to do. And a lot of times that's somebody picking up their phone or going to a file or sending an email. You want to get away from that and have the systems do it. So the compliance measures that you put in place and the policies and procedures will ensure that there is compliance with the AI system. Otherwise, you just got a system that's sending you information, but it's not connected to anything. It's not autonomous, and you're still going to need a large staff to accommodate the needs of the company and the corporation that you're dealing with. Then there's third-party data verification. And evaluating the data provides an assessment of the credibility and reliability of internal and external data sources. And again, I use the reporting agencies as an example. They get financials that if they're audited, they're public, you can pull those in to the extent that they're verified and certified, they're accurate. To the extent that they're not a publicly traded company and don't have to be audited as frequently, how accurate are they? And is their method of reporting different than what your system is capable of uploading? So it's just no tax, no information is available. So then how do you get that information if it's a requirement of your company? Same with liens. If you're filing a lien, in order to do that, you have to have some very accurate data to file with the county, state, or federal government. So those are types of things the system can do, but it has to be trained and it has to be educated. Once you learn it, again, everyone's saying, well, robotics will take care of that, but it'll take care of it only if you train it well. Otherwise, it's going to learn the mistakes as well, and then you've still got another problem that you're going to have to deal with down the road. And then everyone's saying, well, you'll have fewer people. That makes it even more difficult if you're moving somebody out of one department into another, and then there's no resources to handle the hiccups in the system. So verifying the data with the customers, the vendors, the suppliers, making sure all the documentation's in place, the financials that are required by law and audit standards are all in place and are being reviewed by a system. And that is a complete circle as far as the verification process goes, and the most you'll get out of the AI system because you've done everything properly. Creating a scoring card is part of what everybody should be doing, because if the system is making mistakes or some of it's not fully automated and it's partially AI and partially manual, with the scorecard would tell you what is being worked properly by the system. If the system is making mistakes, what needs to be changed, updated, or modified. And the information providing the data has governance practices to make sure that the data that's coming in from whatever source you're getting it, whether it's a transportation company, a taxing system, a filing system for if you're filing UCC filings, all of that is accurate and up to date. So there's a lot to this. And that's why I say it's a step at a time. You can't do big bang because there's nobody out there that's got a system that does big bang. They're going to hear the customers, ERP, the solution providers are going to hear what the customers want, but they also are in business to make money. So if you're asking an ERP provider to provide you with an AI system that meets your needs, but it doesn't meet the general public's needs, they're probably not going to put it high on their priority list. They're going to go after the things that are most important to the customers that are the largest percentage of their paying customer base. So again, it's data quality, monitoring, and reporting, but that's putting that in place first before you even try to go down the AI path is going to be able to get that AI system up and running. From what I know and people I've talked with, they're building their own AI solutions. So they're finding people who can write the code, and it's getting easier, of course, but and they're saying, okay, this is what I need for my customer. And it may be unique to their business. In construction, the goods are delivered to the job site, as an example, and it's raining out, so they can't take it off the truck. It gets stuck in the mud. So they return it to the warehouse and say, okay, when it stops raining, we can get to the job site, we'll put it back. Well, it went out and it came back. That processing time, if it's not automated, is going to take time. Meanwhile, the credit department is saying, well, you're at your credit limit. And they're saying, I didn't even get the shipment. But there is no return authorization because the truck was just turned around. So those are really some real life examples of what happens in an organization. So I'm using different industries so some people can get a flavor for it. Not everybody's going to have that type of environment, but those are examples. So learn from your mistakes. That's continuous improvement. And analyze the data and quality and issue that are going to prevent any future reoccurrences. And sometimes it's not a big deal. And so it's not going to get a lot of attention, which means it's still a manual process and one that has to be handled internally. And so there has to be a process flow for that. And also, if you have a request process on how that can be fixed, then you get into the queue and everybody knows what needs to be done. Here's the training for today's environment. Here's the request for future. And here's the training material that we'll need to train the system now instead of training people. And then providing regular reports. Analytics is very, very robust these days, but you have to tie it to data and the quality of that data and the stakeholders' performance at every level has to be monitored because no system or organization is a one-person show. There's legal department, there's logistics, there's manufacturing. There's all kinds of if you look at the ERP ecosystem in a full, big, national, international company, you've got all kinds of touch points. So you have to know where those touch points are and who is maybe not up to date with their implementation. So how is that being handled by the system? Because artificial intelligence is going to help you if the data isn't there, or if the data has to be converted from one currency to another, what your currency date's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So staying up to date and keeping informed about all the changes internally and externally will help you meet your requirements for artificial intelligence. Eventually, the systems will be smart enough that they'll learn from the mistakes and the gaps, but that's really down the road in the back office operations. Today, I have not seen very many back office operations that are in the process or have implemented some AI that really have addressed the autonomous back office operations. So adopting these strategies can significantly improve the data accuracy and compliance and provide a solid foundation for the AI application down the road. Even if these strategies are already in place, they probably haven't been converted to AI. There's always room for enhancements and improvements once something's up and running. You go, oh, I forgot that, or oh, it'd be nice to have. So that's a common request. And then, of course, you're trying to make the customer, the system's stable, and you have to deal with all the errors, fraud, strengthening the policies and procedures that need to be strengthened and improved, and then you need to create a more robust, reliable framework for your AI. Otherwise, AI isn't going to be much benefit. It's like in the medical field, there's a lot of artificial intelligence is being used now to test a drug, and it takes a lot of things into consideration. But even with that in the medical field, who are pretty much advanced in artificial intelligence, they still have to struggle with the results and how to interpret them. And then they have to train the system to look for the exceptions that they see in their reporting. So it's a slow, gradual process. And then, as I said, it's best to do the easy stuff first and get used to the process and how long it takes to get it implemented once you decide that it's going to be an artificial intelligent process that you're putting in place.
Okay, so how are AI developers dealing with these concerns?
Well, addressing the data quality and compliance challenges in the AI development, as I just said, there's traditional data governance and strategies that are already in place, but they're flawed and they're susceptible to oversight errors, misinterpretations, manipulation, or intentional fraud in some cases. AI developers are actively addressing these concerns with innovative solutions. And so we talked about the different models and explaining how those models will address this issue. So you've got an AI model that is got some biases built in based on the information that was provided. So if those biases are right, let's leave them in. But if you have to improve the model, what do you have to do in the way of debugging them? And you've got to meet the regulatory requirements and ensure that the model meets every regulatory requirement that comes up, that's in place now and comes up in the future. And then how long does it take you to do that? And, I assume that the regulatory would be the tax department or legal department would be addressing that. So again, it's an autonomous and it has to be a joint effort. Then you have to build the trust of your XAI implementation and build the confidence that the model and the decisions and the predictions that it's giving you are correct. So there's a great deal of testing that goes into this and training of the model. And then with the non-technical audience, you've got to train them on how to understand the information that the system is providing, because you've still got a human interface that you have to deal with. Then you have to drill down to the ethical and legal concerns that may get a company into trouble. Again, just a quick example, the contract says you can't auto renew, and if the system isn't programmed to pick that clause up, you're going to be sending out invoices that'll have to be reversed, extra work, little things like that. And then ensure that the project requirements are met. So you got to have a good project to start with, and you got to make sure that they're met and they're on target with the AI and the multi-language models that you're putting in place. So you want to build trust and confidence within your AI. It's essential that whoever's using this new technology trust and has confidence in it, and they adopt the responsibility approach to developing it further in the following areas: automatic detection, data quality and scoring, and real-time monitoring. Those are the three big areas. Then there's the AI powered compliance and monitoring. The system should monitor itself and see that there are discrepancies to help you. A lot of companies aren't building that in right now because it's not in place. So there's still human intervention and there's errors. The risk assessment, again, if you're doing risk assessment, how reliable is the data and what are the historical patterns within your own organization and from trade credit reports it might be getting. Continuous monitoring is real-time data is important in the beginning stages because you're training a computer to know what you're looking for, whether it's a violation or response times. And explain the AI transparency, the techniques that can be explained and how the AI model makes its decision. Everyone should understand that. So it increases the trust and also the accountability of the people that are using it and helping develop it. There's always going to be biases. So it might be, somebody said, I don't have time to do that, so it doesn't get done. Those biases have to be taken into consideration to decide how you can mitigate those biases and have your model really following a consistent way of doing business. It's not if you've got 1,000 salespeople and those salespeople all have a different way of doing things, whether it's submitting a contract or an application or follow up on paperwork, all of that can be done by the system. But if somebody says, well, that's not my job or I don't have time, how are you going to address that? And then what is the root cause analysis for all the exceptions? And then you get into if you're going to use technology like blockchain, or you're going to be tracking it with blockchain and have smart contracts or autonomous integration. Again, all of this depends on domain expertise. Human experts provide the basic starting domain knowledge. There's also textbooks, there's training material, and that it has to be up to date to improve the data quality and compliance along the way. You just can't turn the system on and expect the system to know all the things that people have accumulated over the years and put in a file or in the back of their mind, and they know what to do when the situation comes up. And then, of course, there's the ethical oversight, making sure that humans can ensure that the AI systems are used ethically and responsibly. Continuous improvement doesn't go away with AI. Continuous improvement will be done eventually by the system because it'll learn. But while it's learning, humans have to feed the system. So combining all of these approaches is what you want to do in order to get your AI systems and applications in line for the future. There's another question you might have on this. If you do, let me know. Otherwise, let's move on to the maturity assessment.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, the maturity the assessment maturity tests look pretty extensive. So, with the 5 minutes or so we have left, could you provide a rough estimate of what it would take for an organization to complete these initial tests? Seems pretty
Sure.
important.
Yes, it is. And it depends on the size of the organization and the complexity of the organization and the thoroughness of the infrastructure at this time. If you're going to start out by cleaning everything up before you move into AI, the cleanup will take, in some cases, it takes months. If you're well organized, and in other cases, it could take as much as a year. I've seen it, an implementation take 2 years because they do it a step at a time, a department at a time. That's the way to do it. But if you're going to do several departments, you're going to stretch your resources thin unless you're a very large organization with great infrastructure to support everybody. So it's best to choose what you're going to do and then have everybody work on viewing the timeline, get everybody involved, even though that may not be their area of expertise. If autonomous system is going to work, everybody has to contribute to better reflect the organization's unique circumstances. It's essential. So you've got kind of different phases. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of a company that I did some project work for, and this is the way we set that up. But again, every company is different, so I'm not. Don't stick to this and don't quote me at this. This is fixed. So the first time frame is the activities that are going to start the AI process, the initial assessment and planning. That's usually 2 to 4 weeks. You have to form a team, you have to define the scope and the objectives, develop a detailed assessment plan, and identify the relevant resources and stakeholders. And that requires full participation at all times. You just can't be attending meetings and say, okay, let me know when you get to me. They should be actively involved from the beginning. Then there's a data collection and analysis. This is a little more complex. It's 4 to 8 weeks in this particular company. They weren't international in scope, so there wasn't a lot of complexity as far as other issues that they had to deal with outside US law. Collecting the data, the strategies and the capabilities, again, analyzing the data, identifying the strengths and weaknesses, and where the opportunities lie for AI. So if you're going to do it a step at a time, what's the one that you want to do first? And it may not always be the most complex or most difficult. And assess the alignment with the business objectives. Again, if you're not in line with the business objectives, you're not going to get funding and financing or support. So you've got to make sure that you're aligned with the rest of the organization and evaluate the quality of the data and the governance. Then there's the maturity assessment gap, and that takes another 2 to 4 weeks, and that's assessing all of the information you have, the various dimensions of your AI and strategy, talent, technical infrastructure, and the data and ethics that are going to have to be involved. Identify the gaps, again, desired maturity levels. Is what you have what you want, or do you have to change that? And prioritize and improve all your improvements in an order in which they can be accomplished easily at first. You can get more complex as you get more mature. And then reports and recommendations. Again, that's another 2 to 4 weeks. And I'm not talking about building this. I'm talking about doing the assessment part of it. The building part might be it's complex unless you have the infrastructure in place and you just have to train your AI. So everybody, again, every stakeholder, whether it is at the clerical level or the senior management level, has to be aware of what you want to do to create your action plan for improvement. So the estimated time here was 10 to 20 weeks, and that was really pushing it. But there were one of the things that we learned from it is you have to pull off your best people to dedicate the majority of their time in this project. They become the experts, but they also become usually the team leaders, and they represent the organization that they're part of in meetings where you're going over the status and the shortfallings, if there are any, and the complexities that the organizations run into. Additional considerations is resource allocations, stakeholder engagement, and data accessibility, external expertise. If you're going to use consultants or subject matter experts to assist you, you've got to bring them up to speed before they really become part of the solution. And then the autonomous infrastructure is what I've said in the past, is what you're striving for. The linking of all of the data in every related function is necessary to have AI work behind the scenes and learn how the product and processes work. Planning, execution, assessment, you'll gain valuable insights into the roadmap for your AI. So you're not starting out with a roadmap. You're building as you go along and developing effective strategies and enhancing the operation efficiency and profitability is the goal of every organization when they start down this path. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Brian, if you have any questions or if anybody has written in or called in and has those questions, I'd be happy to answer.
That was all extremely helpful. I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot out of that and give them a lot to think about as they, approach their journey with AI or rethink the one that they've already started. So I do want to just say thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're a busy guy in high demand, so that you can take time out and talk to our loyal listeners means a lot. So appreciate that. And
Well,
also
thank you
want to
again,
thank you,
Brian.
listener, for taking your time out. We know at this time of year it's especially busy. So thanks for spending some time with us and getting some insights. I trust that you'll find a lot of what was said today to be highly useful and highly valuable for you. As you become, sort of the AI expert in your backroom operations. So with that, I will bid you adieu, John. Thank you for stopping by. And we'll see you next episode of the AI Finance Podcast.
Well,
Take
thank
care,
you
everybody.
again. All right.